Imam al-Jazari rahimahullah ta'ala, when he discusses here the affair of tajweed, he goes on to mention what tajweed is not. And that is that he says, and he in actuality quotes Al-Imam Abu Amr al-Dani, the great Imam of Qur'an and Hadith, that died in the year 444. And that is that he mentions, فَلَيْسَ التَّجْوِيد بتمضيغ اللسان بتمضيغ اللسان. He said ليس التجويد بتمضيغ اللسان. تمضيغ اللسان, ikhwan, is that a person recites the Qur'an as though he has a morsel in his mouth. He said tajweed is not that a person makes tamdigh al-lisan. And so he recites as though he has a morsel of food in his mouth. A'udhu billahi, and we're going to give examples, or try and give examples of how that may manifest. A'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim. And so if you were to hear him recite, it is as though there is something in his mouth. Rather, his recitation is one that is clear and natural. And you remember that we discussed in the beginnings of Al-Jazariya that Imam Al-Jazari, he mentions that tajweed doesn't have in it, and the correct recitation of the Qur'an doesn't have in it takalluf. One doesn't overburden himself in relation to his recitation. Rather, his recitation is a natural recitation. And it isn't one that has in it him overburdening himself with pronouncing the letters and with pronouncing the words. Rather, he practices his recitation so that his recitation comes naturally. And that is what he says in the beginning of this passage. ليس بين التجويد وتركه إلا رياضة لمن تدبره بفكه. He said that there is not, in relation to tajweed and one who leaves it, there is nothing between the two of them other than practice. Yani, tajweed is something that is acquired after studying it by practice. Even if one is familiar with the rules, it is imperative that one practices by reciting the Qur'an. So he said, فَلَيْسَ التَّجْوِيدُ بِتَمْدِيغِ اللِّسَانِ. Tajweed is not that we make tamdigh of the lisan, yani that he recites as though he has something in his mouth. He said, وَلَا بِتَقْعِيرِ الْفَمِ. Neither is it with this taq'ir al-fam. And taq'ir al-fam is that one recites predominantly with the upper part of his mouth. Of course, we spoke about and discussed the letters of isti'la. But to recite with taq'ir al-fam is that he makes the recitation, the bulk of his recitation is as though it is coming from the upper part of his mouth, even with those words that are not from the letters of isti'la, not from the letters that are to be recited with the upper palate or by raising the tongue into the upper part of the mouth and what have you. And so it is mathalan that a person, when he recites, he says, A'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim. Yani his recitation sounds as though it is coming from the upper part of his mouth, and he overburdens himself by using the upper part of his mouth when it shouldn't be used. Rather, his recitation should be one that is natural. He mentions وَلَا بِتَعْوِيجِ الْفَمِ. And ta'weej al-fam is that a person adds imala in places where there is no imala. And so his recitation sounds as though he's adding imala to the majority of his recitation. You remember we said imala is a nutq or a recitation that in terms of the haraka, it is a sound that is between kasra and fatha. And it occurs in one place in hafs, and that is in the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, Bismillahi majreha. But ta'weej al-fak is that a person places imala throughout his recitation. A'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim. Thinking that this is or he sounds, or his tongue sounds more Arabi. And here, Abu Amr al-Dani and likewise Al-Imam al-Jazari prohibit this affair. That is not tajweed. This is not enhancing one's recitation. He mentions likewise, وَلَا بِتَرْعِيدِ السَّوْتِ. Neither is it with tar'id al-sawt, which is that a person, when he recites, he initiates that which causes his recitation to sound, or his voice to sound, as though it is trembling. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. So he sounds as though his voice is trembling. Again, this tar'id is not from tajweed. His recitation should be natural. He said, وَلَا بِتَمْطِيتِ الشَّدِّ. تَمْطِيتِ الشَّدِّ, it is to add mad in places where there is no mad, or to elongate that which is already present from mad. And so his recitation, he believes by doing so that he sounds more like Manchawi, when in actuality he's doing nothing but distorting his recitation of the Qur'an. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. If it is that a person is unable to recite and he's practicing, then of course, ikhwan, that is overlooked. But the origin is that one's recitation should be natural. He should not put this voice on when he recites, thinking that is more correct. Likewise, he said, وَلَا بِتَقْطِيعِ الْمَدِّ. Another important issue, and that is تَقْطِيعِ الْمَدِّ. تَقْطِيعِ الْمَدِّ is that when a person recites the mad, he breaks his mad up by a form of trembling with the voice. Yani, so he recites وَالسَّمَاء وَالسَّمَاء. يعني إِنَّ اللَّهَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ. Yani, this trembling of the voice, or this taqti', is to break the mad up by that which he believes he's doing from beautification. So he believes it is beautification of his recitation, when in actuality he's falling into an error from the errors of qira'ah, and that is taqti' al-mad. Was-sama', this breaking of the mad, it is in essence bringing about numerous maddat. It is permissible to change an octave when one recites. يعني من السماء. If one recites مثلا a letter of mad, it is permissible to change the octave. إِنَّ اللَّهَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ. You'll hear that with the famous reciters. But that changing of an octave should not initiate this taqtiya, or this breaking of the mad, which in actuality is initiating maddat. Similarly, he said, وَلَا بِالتَّطْنِينَ الْغُنَّاتِ. And tatneen al-ghunnat, again, is a form of exaggerating with the ghunna. Yani, the ghunna, in its origin, as we've mentioned previously, and we reiterate, is recited harakatain. Man ya'mal. And so, if a person recites with ghunna, then his ghunna should be harakatain, and it should not have in it this tamda, or this tatneen, which is again to tremble with the recitation of ghunna. Man ya'mal. This is tatneen, which again is prohibited. He said, وَلَا بِحَصْرَمَةِ الرَّاءَاتِ. Neither is it with hasramat al-ra'at, which is to restrict the recitation of ra such that he doesn't give it its haqq. So instead of reciting Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, he restricts the ra, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. This is tatneen, hasramat al-ra'at, which is to restrict the ra, not giving it its haqq. This statement then of Al-Imam Al-Jazari, and by, of course, Al-Imam Abu Amr Ad-Dani before him, is an indication of the fact that qira'ah should not have in it takalluf. Recitation should not have in it takalluf, neither should one feign reciting, any change his voice or bring about a sawt or a voice or a sound with his recitation of certain letters that his voice does not normally and naturally produce. Na'am, he concentrates upon his mastering of the sifat of the huruf. He concentrates upon mastering the sifat of the huruf, yani the makharij, or the places of origin. He concentrates on mastering his sifat and the characteristics of the letters, but he does not overburden himself. And when he recites with his own natural voice. He beautifies it as much as he's able, but he does not overburden himself. The scholars of qira'ah, the scholars of recitation, they would speak against this form of takalluf and overburdening oneself in relation to qira'ah. Rather, it is something that should be natural, it should be organic. It shouldn't be something, ikhwan, that is forced or that one initiates difficulty upon himself. Rather, it is to be recited with one's normal voice, implementing the ahkam and the rules of tajweed.